Hi, I'm Chris Habben, president of AAMFT, and I hope that this video finds you well. As is our habit, I'm preparing this video to offer the membership a report of recent AAMFT Board of Director activity. The AAMFT Board of Directors gathered on Wednesday and Thursday, March 7th and 8th for the AAMFT Spring Board meeting in advance of the Spring Leadership Symposium that was held this year in Seattle, Washington. Since this was our first board meeting of the year, we spent some time together as a new board to acquaint ourselves with one another and began our work at 10:45 on Wednesday the 7th. We adjourned from the board meeting Thursday afternoon before preparing for the Leadership Symposium. The board began, as is customary, with a review led by our Performance Evaluation Committee of our summative self-evaluation that we do in December. And we do this as a way to orient ourselves to the year in front of us. During our time together, the board tended to routine business inherent in things like a consent agenda, where we did things like approved minutes from the December 2017 meeting, accepted reports from the president-elect, the chief executive officer, the executive committee, AAMFTE, and a task force that considered guidelines for future JMFT editor searches, and documentation accepting appointments for task forces and committees. The board also spent a lot of time engaged in many discussions around things like interest, networks, and affiliates, the component evaluation committee, and the processes involved with the JMFT editor searches that will happen in the future. Time was devoted to a discussion about the Diversity and Inclusion Committee that we're calling the DISC. As you may know, for the last year and a half, the board has engaged in discussions related to diversity and inclusion. About a year ago, in fact, exactly a year ago at our spring board meeting in 2017, our board meeting began with a consultant who was addressing diversity and governance. And the consultant also had spent some time reviewing our AAMFT policies and procedures with an eye towards matters of inclusion. The AAMFT staff worked to develop an inclusivity statement that was utilized at our last annual conference that you may have noticed. And despite such endeavors, we've been moving in these conversations without really a specific charge or direction. So to that end, the AAMFT Board of Directors in December directed the development of this Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee. And the work of this group is really charged to do really three things: consider a meaningful definition of diversity and inclusion related to corporate governance of AAMFT, to identify barriers which may exist within our association related to inclusion in many of the various association components, and to make recommendations to eliminate those barriers that might exist. Our president-elect, Tim Dwyer, is serving as the DISC chair, and we spent some time discussing the work of the committee that was coming up, and Tim invited discussion from the board. Also kind of excited to tell you that in a step to assuage some of the frustrations that have been felt by many of our Canadian and other international members seeking membership to AAMFT, the board passed a motion to create an alternative pathway within the evaluative track process to eliminate some of these barriers from applicants who are applying from outside the United States. Specifically, a qualifying degree has typically required 5 core courses from any of the 5 educational requirements. The new path now allows that if an applicant has at least 2 of those required 5, they still can qualify their degree by taking courses approved by AAMFT. So this pathway also adjusts the minimum requirement for post-degree didactic contact hours to 36 to accommodate the minimum requirement for a 3-credit course in Canada. And there's a second step set forth by this process to formalize the processes for approving the courses for qualifying a degree. As another business item, the AAMFT board approved a motion by the awards committee to confer awards for the outstanding contribution to MFT, a training award, awards for outstanding volunteer service, graduate research, the diversity scholarships for emerging leaders, a dissertation award, and a master's thesis award. The board approved a second motion made by the awards committee as well to change the nomination deadline for these awards from just January 1 to December 15 to provide the committee more time to have access to the data and the nominations, and that the committee would have a greater profile at events and in publications to remind members about the awards and to do some things to improve the technology managing all of those applications, and then finally to establish a task force to look again at the categories in the awards manual to make sure that the criteria are as clarifying as possible. The board looked ahead during this meeting to new business items upcoming in strategic planning and governance policy updates that are going to need to be made. And the board also had a briefing on the AAMFT Research and Education Foundation. So those are the things that happened during our recent spring board meeting. The board adjourned on Thursday around 1:30 and prepared for the leadership symposium after a training around finances that we also spent some time doing. I hope this is helpful, and again, thank you so much for your time.